Hi, everyone. This is Rebekah Lewin. I am the Assistant Dean for Admissions and Financial Aid at University of Rochester Simon Business School, and I'm excited to present today. For many of you, the start of a new year, the beginning of January, is a time where you're thinking about pursuing advanced schooling and advancing your career, and the financial aid piece of it is often an important piece as you're planning for your future. So we're going to go through some of the opportunities for financial aid and funding, and I'll make myself available for Q&A at the end. So just a little bit about me and my background. Sorry that I'm not able to see you face-to-face in person, but I included a photo just so you could put a face and a name together. I've been at the University of Rochester at the Simon Business School for a number of years, and I have more than 20 years of experience working in higher ed, the majority of that time being spent in graduate business admissions, financial aid, and enrollment management. I've also spent a number of the past few years working on a few different industry boards of directors, most notably the Consortium for Graduate Study and Management, where I'm currently on the executive board and the board of trustees, the MBA Tour School Advisory Board, and the Forte Foundation School Advisory Board, and I'm also a former board of director for that organization as well. And so all of that to say is that not only do I have a deep knowledge of the admissions and financial aid process at Simon Business School, but I've also been able to connect with many of my colleagues at other business schools. And so the information I'm presenting today is going to be a combination of information that will be helpful if you're not sure what schools that you're going to be applying to, and there will be some information that may be specifically helpful for those of you that might be considering applying to University of Rochester in the Simon Business School MBA program. So here I am, University of Rochester. I will comment that there's probably a little bit of white stuff on the ground compared to this photo that was taken a few months ago, but we're presenting live from Gleason Hall, Suite 245, which is the Admissions and Financial Aid Suite within the Simon Business School. Happy to be speaking with you. The agenda today will cover a few different phases. I'm going to first start by talking about what you can be doing to prepare to make this educational investment in yourself, how you would actually determine the cost of pursuing your MBA, what sort of funding options and opportunities exist, and then a little bit about next steps. And I will do Q&A, and Q&A can include financial aid questions as well as questions on admissions or the application process, realizing that this is a key time of year when many schools, including Simon Business School, have application deadlines rapidly approaching. So I want to be able to provide some real-time help for those of you that are working on your applications as well. So like I said earlier, kudos to you for coming on the webinar today, because as you're preparing for this investment in yourself, you really benefit from having knowledge that will allow you to make informed decisions, getting a sense of where you're starting, and understanding your financial position is probably a very important first step. And so some of that is actually really thinking big picture. What does your credit score look like? What would an outside organization say about you in terms of your financial situation? And so probably the easiest way to find this out is to get a copy of your credit report if you don't have one. Take a look at what that information is saying. I know a lot of credit card companies are providing this sort of information as a free tool on their portal or even in their monthly statement that they send out. But this is important information that will equip you to understand your financial situation. That's going to be based on, are you paying your bills on time? What's the ratio of available to credit that you have relative to the credit that you're using? But that's an important first piece, because that will in part determine the rates at which you're able to borrow or the amount that you might be considered for borrowing as you go into the business school financial aid process. A strong credit score will allow you to access educational loans or just credit in general at lower interest rates. And so the kinds of things that hopefully you're already doing, or if not, that you need to consider starting to do, would be paying your bills on time, reducing your overall debt, not taking on any new debt or opening any new lines of credit, hopefully avoiding or limiting the idea of no payment or installment loan options where you may only be paying on the interest but not paying on the principal. And if possible, leaving long-standing credit cards open but not fully utilizing them, maybe making one bill paid on that long-standing credit card on a monthly basis. But all of these things, if you're able to do these things and consistently do these things, they're going to help you to maintain a strong credit score. Another very important thing, not only for planning for business school, but ultimately your business school experience and beyond, is working from a monthly budget. And you'd be surprised at the number of students that I speak to who are looking at or even enrolled in business school. And so they're very business-oriented people, but they may not have ever had to work off of a budget, or they may have just not had training in doing so. But the goal from developing a budget is to live within your means, reduce your monthly expenses, and hopefully even possibly increase your savings. It'll allow you to track your expenses over a period of time. You can look at which expenses are discretionary, meaning you have some choice over whether or not you have that expense, and non-discretionary expenses, so things that you're going to have every month regardless. There's a lot of different tools out there that will help you to manage a budget and can also help you to make some recommendations for meeting your goals. One tool that the University of Rochester has recently rolled out for our current students is a product called SALT. And so I've included the website. And so this is a tool that we're using for our current students, not just our MBA and MS students, but also undergraduate students as well. And, the goal is to help you to be informed and to make decisions that are good for you financially. And this is a tool that will help you to manage that part of your life. And so it's something that will be a benefit for any of you who end up enrolling in the MBA or MS program at University of Rochester. So a little bit more about SALT. Like I said, it is going to provide money management advice, budgeting, even cost of living comparisons. It's designed to give you kind of some third-party advice and perspective from individuals that they don't have a vested interest in the decision you're making. They're looking at it from a big picture perspective, and so they're able to give you feedback and advice, but without a financial stake in whatever outcome you make. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. There may be advice you would get from a financial planner or from your accountant or from your bank or even from your credit card company, but that might not be unbiased. They may have a stake, a financial stake in what sort of outcome you choose. And so the idea of us providing SALT as a tool for our students is that you'll have that unbiased advice. There's even courses that you can take online that can help with transitioning to graduate school, managing credit cards, budgeting, banking, all sorts of things, again, that are good life skills to have and that some of our students may not have coming into their business school experience. One thing that we would also encourage you to do leading up to business school and obviously during and after business school as well is setting some personal financial goals. If you're trying to reduce your debt or you're trying to save money toward the costs that you might have during business school, you could set a personal financial goal. And some of these goals might be a little bit more challenging for you than others, so you may not be able to set goals in all of these areas, but there may be one or two that you say, yep, I could take that on as part of my goals for 2018. So it could be reducing your consumer debt, taking a break from your credit cards for an entire month or even longer, starting a savings account towards graduate school, looking at ways that you can strengthen your credit score, or challenging yourself not to make many or even any discretionary purchases over the next month. And so again, some of those you might look at that particular goal and think, oh my gosh, that's so difficult. But there may be one or two of these that you say, yes, I can take this on, or this seems within reach, and this is going to help me towards my longer term goal, which is going to business school, managing my financial position during business school, and ultimately positioning myself for career advancement. So let's move on to the second agenda item that I talked about earlier, which is determining the educational costs. And this varies a little bit from school to school in terms of what the bottom line will be, but educational costs in general include two different kinds of costs, and it's important to keep both of them in mind. I think many students think of the direct cost of going to business school, which is the tuition and fees that you're paying, and sometimes even just the tuition. Sometimes I think students even forget the fees. The fees could be everything from health fees or IT fees, orientation fees. Definitely varies from school to school as to how much of these fees are add-ons as opposed to just bundled into the cost of tuition. There's also indirect expenses, though, that you need to keep in mind, and those are basically the other parts of being in business school and the costs associated with being in business school that are directly tied to being a student. So room and board, books, personal expenses, transportation, and your school that you attend will develop an average budget of what it should cost. And as you can imagine, some of those indirect expenses vary from city to city, from region to region. There may be some places that are more expensive to live than others, and so your school should be taking into consideration those sorts of things when they develop a budget. However, keep in mind, the cost of attendance does not include a very exorbitant, extravagant lifestyle. It does not include you making credit card payments. It doesn't include travel to go to conferences or job interviews. You're going to have to manage those. If you're planning on having those particular expenses during business school, you better have a plan for how you're going to pay for those, because that is not going to be extra that you can take in terms of loans to cover the cost of business school. So there's a few different kinds of funding and financial aid. The good news is that grants, fellowships and scholarships, and loans are not only expected by many prospective students, but they're also pretty readily available. In fact, I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was yesterday, talking about the scholarships that business schools are setting aside to encourage candidates to pursue full-time MBA studies. So there is a lot of funding out there. But there's also a lot of other types of aid out there. It could be everything from an employer that might be sponsoring you to go to business school, parents who increasingly are helping to support their students to pursue not just undergraduate study, but also graduate study, personal savings, and personal earnings. So hopefully there's going to be a combination of all of those different factors that might help you to be able to fund this next step in your educational journey. So let's talk a little bit more about the scholarships, because I think that's an important piece that you're probably very interested in hearing about. There are school scholarships and there are outside scholarships that are available. The outside scholarships, the private scholarships, there's quite a few out there, but each of them is going to have a unique application process and criteria for consideration. The prospective student is going to need to do a lot of self-directed research on those different scholarship opportunities. It's an outside application process. It's not managed by the business school. It's managed through foundations or organizations. They have funding set aside. Some of them, in fact, a number of them may stipulate that you need to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. resident. And the application deadlines are usually months before you're starting business school. So now would be a great time to be looking into those opportunities. Some of them require that you already have an admission offer secured from a school in order to apply. And so being an early application round, either the first round or the second round, is usually important to meet those particular deadlines. The good news is if for some reason you missed the deadline in 1 year, but you otherwise think you're qualified, you might be able to catch that scholarship during the second year of your program, even if you didn't manage to catch the application process and consideration during the first year. I'm including a few online resources. These are legitimate, well-known third-party resources. They're aggregators. They look for legitimate scholarships that are available that you can apply to. I would be very wary of scholarships or websites that require you to pay money in order to learn about scholarship opportunities. I won't say it's a scam. I mean, maybe they could come up with something different, but these are free resources. And so I would encourage you to start here, and I would expect that these would be fairly comprehensive in terms of legitimate and some of the more significant sorts of funding opportunities that might be available. There's also school-based funding available. And of course, I can't talk about every school, so I'm just going to talk about Simon Business School and some of the scholarships that we have available. Our scholarships are merit-based, and so these are scholarships that will be offered at the time that you are admitted. A merit-based scholarship means that we're looking at the overall application that you're submitting, and so they are going to be competitive. We're going to compare your candidacy to other candidates that are also applying. And so we're going to look at the profile that you have. We're going to look at your essays. We're going to look at your recommendations. All of those different factors are going to be things that are considered in the review process. It's not just your GMAT score or your GRE. It's not just the years of work experience. It's all the different components of the application, qualitative and quantitative, that would be taken into consideration. And basically, a scholarship will reduce the amount of tuition that you have to pay. It's a percentage reduction in the cost to enroll. And so you can look at the tuition level for the program you're applying to, and basically the scholarship will reduce by a percentage the amount of funding that you will have to be responsible for during your MBA or your MS program. We also offer graduate assistantships, and so those are opportunities that require some sort of work on your part or some sort of service requirement. They may even require a special skill set or focus. And the graduate assistantships range from working in a particular department, like the admissions office or the career management center, to working with faculty. These are all part-time opportunities that can be open to domestic and international students, the scholarships and the assistantships. For the assistantships, there's usually an application process that occurs once you're an enrolled student. The scholarships, there's a very small section of the online application that will ask if you are interested in being considered for funding. Of course, you would answer yes, and once you've answered yes, then you will be able to be considered for funding. So that should be available for you. There's not a separate essay that you need to write. There's not a separate application process. So that's something that's very straightforward. I tell students, if you're independently wealthy, or if you have a trust fund set up, or you're sponsored for your education, then you cannot apply for scholarships. You know, there would be no need to. But otherwise, you should apply. It's not going to change whether or not you would be considered for admission. The admission and the scholarship decisions are separate. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about the process for decisions on scholarships. Once you're admitted, the committee is going to look at you on both an absolute and a relative basis compared to other candidates. So your quantitative pieces of the application, those are super easy to compare across candidates, but they're not the only thing that's considered. And so I think a lot of students get hung up on, well, I have a certain GMAT score, so what are my chances for a scholarship? Or I have this many years of work experience, or this GPA. So what are my chances for a scholarship? Those things are factors, and of course those are the easy things to assess, but we're also looking at some things that are a little bit more difficult to assess, and certainly more difficult to compare across candidates. Your leadership potential, your communication skills, personal presence, career focus, school fit, unique contributions, or backgrounds. All of those things would be things that would be considered. So one thing that I want to recommend that you also keep in mind, the financial aid puzzle usually involves not just scholarships, which we've talked about, and graduate assistantships, which we have also talked about, but also loans. And so there's a few different kinds of loans that are available. There's loan options for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, and then there's some different opportunities for international students. So for U.S. citizens and U.S. residents, please complete the FAFSA. If you haven't already done so, you don't have to wait to complete that. That process changed a few years ago, so they'll look at the prior year's tax forms that you submitted and that data and use that to confirm your eligibility. Typically, unless you're in default on undergraduate loans or other loans that you've taken through the federal government, you should be eligible for $20,500 per academic year. There is also a Grad Plus loan available that will cover the full cost of attendance. So remember back an earlier slide, I was talking about the cost of attendance being the direct cost and the indirect cost of going to business school. So the tuition and fees plus the indirect costs of room and board and personal expenses and transportation. And again, that's all based on an average budget. It's not for the indirect fees. You don't, you can't come back to us and say, well, I'd like to live in a very, very expensive apartment, and so it's going to cost me more, and therefore can I get more? No, you need to orient your budget and your decisions on where to live and what sort of expenses you're going to carry based on that overall average budget. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind. Keep in mind also the Grad Plus loan may require a credit check. And so you're going to want to make sure that you are either building up a strong credit score or that you're finding a cosigner in the unlikely event that you are not approved for a Grad Plus loan. You don't want to be in a situation where you're scrambling at the last minute trying to figure out funding. And the reason that there's a gap or a concern is because of your credit score. So you need to plan for that. And like I said, it may be having a conversation with someone in your close family circle about co-signing. Certainly the MBA has a very strong return on investment, and your future earnings are going to be very strong, especially if you're going to a top-ranked business school. But you want to make sure that you have a plan for how to fund your studies. There are also educational loans for international students, a few different possibilities. There's some private loan options and loans without a cosigner that might be available. I've listed a few that I'm aware of. Simon also offers a no cosigner loan option for our MBA program. And so that is a fund that we have available that we have been able to tap into. And so we award our loan program at the time of admission. We package international students for financial aid, both scholarship and the no cosigner loan at the time of admission. So you would have that information when you're being admitted and as you're evaluating whether or not you're going to accept our offer. There may be also some other options, loans through home country banks or the government, or private loans if you have a U.S. cosigner. But all of those are going to be things that you're going to need to explore on your own. My strong recommendation would be look at our loan program first if you're an international student, and that in almost every case is going to be a really attractive option unless you are already aware of something that has super fantastic terms and conditions. Our international loan program has been something that's been very seamless and that we've been able to facilitate for a large number of our incoming students. Also, some other funding sources I wanted to point out in case you're not aware already. We've already talked a little bit about personal savings and family support. For any U.S. veterans, there are several veteran benefits that you may be able to avail yourself to through the post 9/11 GI Bill. University of Rochester participates in what we call the Yellow Ribbon Rochester Pledge. And so the majority of our U.S. military veterans are able to pursue their MBA with a limited financial outlay on their part. The veterans benefit along with scholarship that would be available through Simon Business School should be able to help cover costs. But again, that's something that we can explore individually if it's something that you are interested in learning more about and you don't already have information. I also wanted to highlight a few partnerships that Simon Business School has that might also allow you not only an opportunity for scholarships and funding, but some of them also have some additional benefits relating to access to companies and networking and some other benefits that are available for students that are selected. So the Forte Foundation is an organization that Simon has been affiliated with for about 10 years. And this has been a fantastic organization for us to partner toward advancing the number of women who are both pursuing business school, but also ultimately preparing for senior management positions, executive level positions in organizations. So it's specifically designed to advance women within business. And not only are there scholarship opportunities, there's annual conferences and networking opportunities, as well as access to companies. So a really fantastic organization and one that we make available to our incoming women. We're also a member of the Consortium for Graduate Study in Management, and this is a fantastic organization for individuals who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents who have made significant investments in advancing the opportunities for underrepresented minorities. And so there is a separate application process, not only for admission, but also for scholarship opportunities through the consortium. Most of that scholarship funding for both the Forte and consortium, actually for all of these scholarships, most of the funding is actually given through the schools. So the schools are managing their own financial aid budgets and making some of these awards. But like I said, there are fantastic networking opportunities and other benefits that students have if they're selected for one of these scholarships that really enhance the business school experience. We are also a member of Peace Corps Fellows, offering scholarships to candidates who are returning from a Peace Corps assignment. We are also a partner with Teach for America, and again, offering opportunities for individuals who have finished a stint with Teach for America. And more recently, we also developed a partnership with Reaching Out MBA, which is a organization known as RAMBA, and it's particularly targeted at LGBT individuals. And so there's a separate opportunity for not only scholarship consideration, but also networking and access to company and conference access through this particular fellowship as well. So all of these are available and just enhance the opportunity for scholarship funding. So let's talk a little bit about next steps. I wanted to encourage you to submit your application for 2018 if you haven't already. This can be done concurrently with some of the other recommendations I made about the financial goals. But if you're planning on enrolling in business school for 2018, we would certainly encourage you to get moving on that application. We actually have a deadline tomorrow, which might be a little bit short notice if you're just starting the process. But I know for many of you, you've already been working on essays and recommendations. And so it's really just putting all of those details together to get your application submitted. And then, like I said, the application process for scholarships is very easy. It's literally just indicating yes on your application that you wish to be considered. Scholarship Weekend is an opportunity that I want to mention specifically. It's an invitation-only event for some of our admitted students. They're invited to Rochester for the weekend. Students are competing for an increase in scholarship support, an opportunity to be named for a special scholarship based on certain criteria. as well as to be considered for full tuition scholarships and living stipends. So that's a special opportunity. It's a subset of the students that are admitted each year who are invited for scholarship weekend. So it's not available for everybody. You would definitely need to apply by the January 5th deadline tomorrow to be considered, or for the earlier round, because some of those invitations have already gone out and space is limited. You can certainly, if you've already submitted your applications and you're already working on shoring up your financial situation, now would be a great time to start researching some of the private or government funding opportunities, completing your FAFSA if you're a domestic student. There's definitely, you're probably going to feel like you have a little bit more time on your hands once you hit submit on those applications. And so this is a good thing to kind of take your mind off the waiting process as you're waiting for interview invitations or a feedback from a school that you've already applied to, and will also be oriented toward helping set you up for your goals. So with that, we finished the prepared remarks. I actually wanted to ask the Beat the GMAT moderator if they could possibly give me access to the question module, because I don't see it here in my
sure, give me one second.
Okay, thank you. But if you have questions, usually we facilitate questions by writing them in to the typing them in, and then once they're typed in, I will read the question out loud, and I will try to answer as many of them as possible. I see that we have a number of questions, so I can't promise that we'll be able to answer all of them, but I'll do my best in the 25-ish minutes that we have left to be able to answer them for you. So the first question was, will this be recorded so we can go back and re-watch it at a later date too? As far as I know, yes. That will be that should be available. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me via email. It's rebekah.lewin@simon.rochester.edu. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint deck, I'd be happy to email it to you. If you have specific financial aid questions, either that we don't answer today or that are more private, that you don't really want to put out there for everyone during the conversation this afternoon, feel free to send me a note. I'm actually not the financial aid expert. I oversee financial aid within the Simon Business School, but I do have an expert on my team who is available, as well as our University of Rochester financial aid office, who helps to facilitate the entire packaging process for our students. If you're running into questions that you have specifically about your situation, we can try to help with that. So I have a question here. Simon scholarships are just for University of Rochester. Yes, that's correct. They're for the MBA or the master's programs at University of Rochester Simon Business School. So there's a question here about, let's see here. Can I get scholarships even if I apply for later rounds? It depends on the school. So for Simon Business School, yes, we have scholarships for both early rounds and later rounds. The scholarship weekend is available for students that apply round 1 or round 2, but there still are some scholarships that are available for students that apply round 3 or round 4. So it depends on the school, whether or not they have a very strict process or a very strict deadline. Some schools may have limited funds or no funds available if you apply after a certain date. So that's definitely something where you may need to check with the school for more information. Okay, let's see here. So there's a question about, are there benefits for family members, children of veterans for school funding? So I believe that the yellow ribbon benefits that are available for U.S. veterans can be transferred to a family member, but we have a veterans expert in our financial aid office, and so if that's something that you're not aware of, you probably need to start the conversation with your family member first to see if that's a benefit that they are able to transfer to you, if they are a beneficiary of the 9/11 GI Bill. And if they are, is that funding that they would feel comfortable allocating to you toward your MBA studies or not? If they are, then we could certainly start a dialogue around what that would look like. But again, that would be a very individual sort of conversation that we would want to have. So I have a question here. Typically, how many scholarships are available to students from the school? And are any of them financially need-based? So for Simon, they are not need-based scholarships. They're merit-based. We do not collect enough information about a student and their financial situation to be able to gauge financial need. And that's honestly, especially with the number of international students that we have applying, that would be very challenging for us to do a comprehensive assessment of financial need. There may be some schools that are basing the financial aid decisions more on financial need, but if you read the Wall Street Journal article that I referred to, you'll even note that even some of the schools that have indicated that scholarships are more financially need-based may also be considering other factors in the decision-making process. It's my understanding that the large majority of schools that are giving out funding are giving out funding more on a merit basis than on a need basis. That being said, the merit basis could be based on things other than just your GMAT or your GPA. It may be based on other demographics or other factors in your background. And so there's certainly possibility for you to qualify even if you're not, even if you don't feel that your GMAT is the strongest. So certainly encourage you to look into that. And for Simon, more than 2/3 of our students are getting scholarships. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to invest in students and help defray the cost of business school, as well as to encourage students that we think are the right fit to enroll and to feel really good about their decision. And that's one of the things that's led to Simon having a ROI ranking in the top 10 for US private business schools. And that's been something pretty consistent over the past 2 years. That's been a ranking both with Bloomberg Business Week and more recently, I believe it was with Forbes. And so it's something that we feel is important, rather than giving 10% of our students full rides plus a big stipend. We're giving medium level scholarship support to a number of students, and then there are still some students who are able to qualify for full tuition scholarships. So I hope that makes sense. If I don't completely answer your question and you have a follow-up one, you're welcome to type something else in. I'm still kind of working my way through the questions that are already in the queue, so please be patient if I haven't gotten to yours yet. Let's see here. So I have a question about for U.S. students that are looking to study outside of the U.S., where should you look for scholarships? So some of the private scholarships might be options. Obviously, the school might have funding available, so I would certainly start there. That's the most obvious. But some of the private scholarships that I mentioned that are through foundations or organizations, they might be available and apply to you even if you're studying outside the U.S. You want to look at those applications very carefully, though. It's a combination of, do you meet the eligibility criteria to apply, as well as what is the scholarship covering? Is it available just for tuition? Can it be used for tuition and fees? Can it be used even toward your living expenses? Meaning, if you already get a scholarship that covers part of your costs, could you get a refund back towards some of your living expenses if this outside scholarship covers more than your remaining costs for your tuition or your fees? So each scholarship is going to be different. It's going to require some legwork on your part to look into it, but that's where the scholarship aggregator that I referred to earlier in the presentation would be helpful. So let's see here. I have a question here from an international student wondering about what are the scholarship funding opportunities for students from developing countries who might not have support from government or parents. So I think it's going to be a combination of scholarships and loans. I think those are the two primary criteria. The good news is that Rochester offers the loan for international students, and you would not need to have a cosigner. It's not going to be based on, your income, because we know that in a developing country, your pre-MBA income is likely to be quite low. It's really going to be based more on what is your future earning potential, given that you're pursuing your MBA from University of Rochester. And if we're admitting you, we're willing to facilitate offering you a line of credit toward your studies. So I would say those are the two primary. Our loan does not cover your living expenses. It'll cover your tuition and fees. So as an international student, you're going to need to line up your own personal resources to cover your living expenses. And most of our students are able to do that. But I did also mention a few other loans that are available that don't require a cosigner, a few other organizations. But again, if you're applying to University of Rochester, I would recommend that you start with our International Student Loan Program. It's something that we're able to serve as an intermediary with the lender and the loan servicer for questions and support that might come up. Okay, let's see here. Other than credit score and last year's tax return, could you advise on other typical documents you need to have to apply for financial aid? Well, I think that depends. The last year's tax return is going to be the main thing that you're going to need for the FAFSA. You don't need parent information once you're in grad school, so that's usually not a factor. So I think that's the main thing that you would need. If you run into a question about something specifically, or that you're not quite sure of once you start the FAFSA, you can save everything that you've done so far and then research that particular topic or that particular issue. There are occasions where there's something that's just very nuanced about your background or your situation, and so we're here to help you. If you're applying to University of Rochester to the MBA program and you have a question on your FAFSA or a question about financial aid, reach out to us and ask, and we'll do our best to answer it for you or at least point you in the right direction. Okay, so question here that's more admissions oriented. Can you give insight on Simon's admissions rubric? What factors are particularly important? So for our MBA program, the majority of our students do have several years of full-time work experience, and so there is an emphasis on looking at the quality and the amount of work experience that someone has, as well as how that ties to your future career goals and how that would be a fit for the different program offerings that we have, the typical career outcomes that we're offering. We do an admissions interview, which is largely focused on talking about your resume and your prior career experience, as well as your career goals, but also getting to know you a little bit. We are a smaller MBA program. We have about 105 to 115 students enrolling in our MBA program each year. And so with that size cohort, it's particularly important that we're looking at the mix of students and the community and really putting an emphasis on having a really strong culture and community. And so the interview helps with that. It is a quantitative program, so we are both looking at students that have a strong quantitative background, as well as the poets, so individuals who might have been a communications major or an English major or history major in undergrad, but really looking to shore up their quantitative skills. And we have an on-ramp that will help students, regardless of whether they have a strong quantitative background or not, to really up-level and be strong academically and ready for our quantitative curriculum. And I think we've talked to students who fit both of those profiles, who feel as though the Rochester MBA has been a great experience and platform for them. And I think when you're thinking about this day and age where data and business analytics is talked about extensively by both cutting-edge businesses as well as businesses that are looking to continue to innovate, graduating from an MBA program that facilitates you developing and improving those skills is going to be really critical to your success as a future business leader. We're also going to look at the standard things like your recommendations and your undergraduate transcripts and, of course, your GRE or your GMAT. Those things are also going to be used both on a relative and an absolute basis in terms of assessing your capabilities. But it is a holistic review. We're looking at all of those different factors. We include our 80% ranges for GMAT, GPA, work experience, those sorts of things on our website, so you can take a look. But roughly low 500s to 700s on the GMAT, around a 3 to a 3.8 or 3.9 for GPA, from about 2 years to maybe 8 or 10 years of work experience would be kind of the middle 80% ranges to keep in mind. And again, we're looking at quality and quantity. We see some students with more limited experience, but it's just really amazing experience. And then you could also see someone that has, really high scores, but isn't quite ready for business school. So it's going to be digging a little bit deeper than those ranges to really make a full assessment of candidacy. So there was a question about giving the name of the scholarship aggregator. So let me go back to that slide and I'll leave it here for a few minutes so that you can reference it. Fastweb.com is one of them, and then Peterson Scholarship Search is the other, which is found on the Peterson's website. So you might have to register, create an account or something to get access, but you can search based on some different criteria, what type of degree are you pursuing. So these aren't just for MBA. Some students who might be in undergrad still or pursuing other disciplines might also be searching. But like I said, these are legitimate tools, and they're not going to be asking you to, write them a check or send them money in order to qualify for funding opportunity. Okay, let's see here. If you have other questions, I think I'm nearing the end of the questions that have been asked. I'm happy to take a few more if you have them. We have until 1 o'clock Eastern, which is about 10 minutes from now, so I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. Let's see. Someone else wanted my email ID. I will put that out there on chat to all of you. Just give me a second here. I'm sending that now, so you're welcome to follow up with me. I promise to answer you or forward your email to someone who can help answer you. I try to keep up on my email every day or so, so I can't promise an instantaneous answer, but I'll certainly try to keep in mind the time sensitivity of your request, realizing many of you might be thinking about application-related questions and round 2 deadlines, which are upon us as of this moment. So I have a question here about scholarships. Can you apply in the second year? So some of them you can. Most of the scholarships for Simon are awarded for your first year, and they're continuing for your second year, automatically based on maintaining your GPA and not having any issues in terms of maintaining the honor code and the behavioral code for the school. You'll maintain your scholarship support. There are not any new scholarships, Simon, that you apply for in your second year. There may be outside scholarships so that you could apply for in your second year, even if you don't receive them during your first year. But that's something to keep in mind with schools that you're applying to. Kind of read the fine print on scholarships. Is it a scholarship that you automatically continue to get in your second year? Do you have to reapply for it in your second year? Is there any possibility the scholarship level will change, or is it guaranteed? And that might vary a little bit from school to school. Like I said, we will guarantee the scholarship level in the second year, provided that you're maintaining your grades and staying in good standing with the school. So question here about GMAT versus GRE. I feel like this comes up a lot. Do we weigh the GMAT and the GRE the same? So we're indifferent. We don't have a preference between the two. Part of that is because over the entire time that I've been at Simon, which is more than 15 years, we've accepted the GRE or the GMAT for our PhD program and for our master's programs. And so moving to allow the GMAT or the GRE for the MBA program was just an extension of admissions policies we already had in place for our other graduate programs. So there's no difference in terms of GRE or GMAT. We have a sense of how students tend to do academically based on both of those exams. And we will look at your grades in school along with either your GRE or your GMAT in assessing. If you submit both, we will look at both and take them both into consideration. So if you feel like you did well on both of them and you want to submit them both, or if you did stronger on the quant on the GRE, but better on the verbal on the GMAT, you might want to submit both. You know, like I said, we'll consider them both if you have both of them available. Okay, so I have a question about from a student about what are the thoughts of applying in the third and fourth rounds instead of first or second. So I'm glad you asked because I think that this is something that students tend to obsess about a little bit. The third or fourth round could be a great option for you if you are not yet ready and prepared to apply now. You know, like I said, our deadline is tomorrow. If you have not started your application yet, you haven't, started writing the essays and collecting references, I don't think you're probably going to meet the deadline. You certainly can apply later this month, and we actually have rolling admission, and so we will process your application as soon as we receive it. That's different from some schools, though, and so you would definitely want to check in with schools. So candidly, if you're, if 2018 is your year to go to business school, you could still be a very strong candidate and get your application submitted in January, February, early March, and we will still have lots of spots available because we're still reviewing round 2 people that have applied. So you'll kind of fold right in and be in the mix for consideration. Fourth round will be a little bit more just in time. We still do have a few spots available. Some of them tend to be local candidates or candidates that just might have had a major career change or life change that happened unexpectedly. Or maybe you tried the GMAT and you're kind of keeping your options open for 2018 or 2019, and then you're really happy with your score and think that now would be a great time. If that's the case, there's really not a lot of downside for applying and just seeing how you do. As long as you have a appropriate mix of schools where you feel you will be competitive and maybe a few reach schools, third round or even fourth round still could be a possibility. Like I said, the main difference, and it's something that varies by school, is whether or not you can be considered for scholarships. At Simon, there's still lots of scholarship opportunities, but that may vary by school. There may be some schools where there's limited funding or even no funding if you're applying very late. So just something to keep in mind. So there's a question here about freezes on credit reports that I'm just going to have to defer. I'm sorry, it's not something that I have enough expertise to be able to answer, so I apologize. Like I said, I oversee financial aid within the business school, so all of our scholarship budget and our international student loan program budget, but I am not the expert when it comes to some of the processes and procedures relating to federal government loans. And so we can certainly talk offline if you want some help with that. Please send me an email and we can try to get you an answer for that question. We're winding down. We have just a few minutes left. I can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions if you have them. If you prefer to email me directly, if your question is more of an individual one, or if you have questions about the application process, happy to answer those as well, and would be happy to be a resource. But for those of you that might be trying to quickly log back out and head back to work, thank you for coming on today. It was certainly a pleasure connecting with you. I hope this information was helpful as you're planning for your career advancement and your future graduate school plans. And we would love to connect with you if you're interested in exploring the MBA program at University of Rochester. I know some of you may already have an application started, and so we'll hope to see that soon. And if you haven't or would like to explore it, let me know, and I can connect you with someone on our admissions team that can provide some advice and assistance as you're working through the process. So if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, send me an email, and I would be happy to send it back to you so that you can have some of the other slides for your own reference. Okay, thank you so much, and good luck, and have a great afternoon.